Well, welcome. I'm with author Janyre Tromp. Pleasure to meet you and be introduced to you. Welcome.
I'm so excited to be here.
And I love your shirt. What can I do? What do I need to do to get into your book?
All you have to do is ask for you. I'll put you in. I'm actually in the process of writing a book, and I have lots. It's a big cast, so I need character names.
And what if you can't see it? It says "Careful, or you'll end up in my novel." Love it.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Right.
So I gotta read my paper here because you have on your website, my passion is writing about the beauty of the world, past and present, even when it isn't pretty, which most of life is not pretty,
no, it
is
is
it?
not.
So give me an example of that, like something in your...
Right. So I first have to say, so in my personal life, this is something that I'm really careful about doing because my life isn't easy. If you see me on social media, most people say I'm a pretty joyful person, but if you scroll back far enough, like I almost lost my daughter a couple of times. She was very, very sick, and we almost lost her. That's, I think, a parent's worst nightmare.
Yes.
And so I took that and I'm finding good things out of that. And so that's something I work on in my life. And when I'm writing, I want to write about real things. So when you see "Careful or you'll end up in my novel," I write about really hard topics. I do not hold punches, but on the other side, I want to find that goodness. And so one example is in my book, my debut, Shadows in the Mind's Eye. It's about a guy who comes back from World War II, and he was in the Pacific, and he was a coxswain, which is the guys that drive the amphibious boats up onto the beach. So he saw some pretty ugly things. And he comes home, and he's struggling with figuring things out. One of my favorite characters is his mom, and her name is Debbie May. Debbie May is patterned a little bit after my grandmother. And Debbie May at some point says, the God who created rainbows also created the thunder and the lightning. Can't you trust him to find the rainbow for you? And so it's like those types of things where you just kind of have to find it. You have to settle into it and look for those things because they're there. Mm-hmm. And each of the patterns of my books, they follow that arc. That's the story arc where you have harder and harder and harder things, and then you have that climax where it's like, oh my goodness, how is this going to be fixed? Mm-hmm. And then I'm amazed at how I find hope. Even in those really hard crisis moments of real life with real people, if you're looking for it, you can find hope on the other side. There's goodness there. And so it's just something that I focus on in my writing because I believe that it's always going to be there, even when you can't see it in the moment.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent. Yeah, it is hard when there's some down times.
and you know what? Most of us do. Like you said, we all have hard things in our life. And when you look on social media, it looks all glossy and pretty, and it's really easy to get into that woe is me mindset of my life doesn't look like that. Mm-hmm. And it's just one of those things where I've determined in my life, and I'm not always good. Good heaven knows, I am not perfect. What? I am not perfect.
You're going to end up in your book.
I'm going to end up in, well, you know what? They do say that the writers end up in their own books, and it's amazing to me. So Shadows in the Mind's Eye, I actually started writing before my daughter got sick. And it was about 3/4 of the way through that book when she got really, really sick. And I had to set the book aside, and I set it aside for like 2 years. But when I came back to it, it's amazing when your own book ministers to you. When you read your own book and you go, I needed to be reminded of that. But it also gave me a new perspective too, because my two characters, they're married, a husband and wife, and the wife is a caretaker for this guy who is really struggling, and I had never been in that position before. And so it gave me the opportunity to look at that and see the things that I did well for my daughter and the things that I probably could have done better for her, and to figure those things out and put them on the page for other people to hopefully help them too, and entertain them in the process, because that's what books are about, novels.
Yes, absolutely. So what kind of genre are you?
I actually do, I genre bend, which is kind of a weird concept. So I'm technically listed as historical fiction, but I play with, I say I'm historical fiction with a healthy dose of lyrical suspense. And lyrical suspense is something that one of my readers gifted me as a description. Because I love words. My day job, I'm an editor, so I live and breathe words. And so on the page, I get to play with words in new and creative ways to create emotion in the reader and help draw them into feeling what exactly is going on. So that kind of suspensey, a little bit psychological suspense, definitely historical. I love history. If you sit with me for any length of time, you're going to hear about all kinds of probably pretty boring historical facts that don't get to go in my books. Darn.
Are there boring historical facts? I don't know. I didn't think so. But
I don't know, because a lot of them are really interesting. So the novella that I wrote that goes in A Little Town, it is actually the Japanese during World War II bombed the state of Michigan. And most people don't know this.
No, it's news to me.
It happened, and I had to put that in a book. And so it's all sorts of fun and interesting.
Why Michigan?
Things. So they didn't do it on purpose. They put these huge balloons up, and they attached incendiary and anti-personnel bombs to it, and sent them up into the jet stream.
Wow.
So the U.S. was bombed hundreds of times by the Japanese during World War II.
Where do you find that information?
I'm a history geek. I read weird stuff, and it just like you follow these weird rabbit trails, and you're like, what? And then I keep a document of weird historical facts that I can like dig into. But the book I'm writing right now is 1976, and it's like I started the research on one topic, and I needed a conflict between my two main characters. And as I was researching the history gave me the conflict. So it like came right straight out of history, and it's just, it's amazing.
I love history, and that's what I love about reading historical fiction.
Yes.
And I will read a book, and then some small piece of the book is about history, and then I go on the rabbit hole of Googling that. I know one was like about this island in Jamaica. I can't think of it now, but I'm like, it's like underwater, and it's just so fun. And then you just keep going down and finding this really cool facts, like your Michigan stuff. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Literally, one of the balloons survived that hit Michigan. One of the balloons survived, and it is in a box a mile from my house in the Historical Museum just down the road from me.
Wow.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So you must live in Michigan.
I do. I live in Michigan.
Okay.
I live in Michigan, yeah.
All right. So what got you into writing and wanting to be a writer? You mentioned you're an editor.
Yeah.
So did you get into that first then? And
Yep, and actually people kind of call me a rainbow unicorn a little bit, because usually editing and writing are a little bit different skills, but I don't edit like what most people think of editing. I don't do commas. I'm better than your average person about knowing where commas go, but I'm not amazing at it. Those are proofreaders, and they're amazing. I love them. I could not do what they do. So I edit stories. So I take the big picture of things and help mold that into something even better. So I do really big global book length type things. And so one day, my boss, who's the managing editor, came to me and he said, you're a really instinctual editor. Like, you don't edit by the rules. You go, this doesn't feel quite right. What's wrong here? And then you move from there instead of like, this doesn't fit the rule. And he's like, I think you'd be a really good writer. I think you should try it. And so I did. I did, and I found out I really liked it. But yeah, I even stumbled into editing. I was a chemistry major in college. And my freshman year. Doesn't that just blow your mind? Yeah. So different. And I was really good at it because I ask a lot of questions. I'm a curious person. So I think that's where they overlap. is I want to know how things work and how that happened and why that happened and how we got here. And so I think that's why they overlap. The chemistry is very much like an investigative world, and so is writing, at least historical writing for me. And so it was freshman year. Started hating labs though, in chemistry. And I called my mom and I'm like, Mom, what do I do? I don't like chemistry anymore. And she says, Janyre, just do what you love, right? And I'm 17 and I think I know everything because 17-year-olds know everything.
I did too.
Right. I have a daughter who's 18, God bless her. I love her to pieces. I even like my 18-year-old. But I said to my mom in all my 17-year-old wisdom, Mom, nobody gets paid to read. Right? And of course the great irony is I get paid to read. So anybody out there that's a kid, your mom knows everything. Listen to her, she always knows the best. But I ended up just kind of declaring an English degree by default. And that's how I kind of fell into my calling. And it's kind of a cool place to be.
Awesome. And you know, I got to listen to you guys all speak last night. And how old were you when you read, who was it you read?
C.S. Lewis. So I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in first grade. A little bit precocious.
I have still not read that book.
Yeah.
45.
Yeah. But I think part of why I loved that book so much was I identified so closely with Lucy Pensieve, who is arguably the main character of the book. But she was kind of shunted off from her siblings, and she was very imaginative, but nobody really paid attention to her. And her next oldest brother was not always very kind to her. So I very much identified with all of that for Lucy. And so she became somebody in the story, the brave one, the one that people started listening to. And so I think that awoke in me this desire to overcome this feeling of not being enough, and being able to do stuff even when you don't feel enough. And I love that for her character and for me.
Isn't it amazing how powerful books are and how they can help and shape and form and
Yes.
you know, and heal, and it's incredible.
So there's actually science behind that. Did you know that?
No.
So there is science behind the power of story. And it's the science, they call it the science of story. And so when you hear a story about something, it lights up the fact side of things. Like if I were to tell you a fact, the historical fact of Michigan getting bombed during World War II, the fact side lights up. But when you hear a story about these three boys, they went out into the field and they saw this weird balloon and they learned this and they learned that. Suddenly, not only is the information side of your brain lighting up, but so is the experiential side of your brain. So when you read or hear a story about something, it's like you're experiencing it for yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's a totally different set of learning. And that's why story is so powerful, because you enter into it into a different way than you would anything else. And you remember facts because you've experienced it for yourself.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
It is
I love it.
Crazy. Before we finish, so how many books do you have out? And
mm-hmm.
What are they?
What are they? So I have my very first, well, I actually have kids' books before I did any of the adult stuff. But if we're talking about stuff that's written for adults, so I have Lovely Life, which is a novella that I did. We just broke up the novella collection. It was such a fun novella collection. Each story was a riff off of a famous Christmas movie. So mine is kind of a white Christmas meets Daisy Jones and the Six, because it's 1970s. It happens in a real castle, because why not? Real castle in Michigan. And it's a story about a Vietnam vet coming home and trying to save his family's castle that they have a restaurant and hotel in. And so that's Lovely Life. And then Shadows in the Mind's Eye is just post-World War II with the guy that has PTSD. And then I have a novella called While Mortals Sleep that's in a collection called A Little Town. And that one is the one with the Japanese bombs.
Okay.
And then I have another one coming out in spring of 24 that's called Darkness Calls the Tiger, and that is World War II Burma.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your stories with us. I greatly appreciate you talking with me. And,
Absolutely.
how can people learn more about you and your books?
Oh, absolutely. So I tell people, if you can spell my name, you can find me. But good luck spelling my name. So I'm going to spell it, and then that's my everything from social media to my website. So it's JANYRETROMP. So that's my tag for Instagram, for Twitter, for Facebook. That's my web address. That's everything. The nice thing about having a unique name right there.
Yes. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
I appreciate, like I tell other people, sharing your gift of writing so that we can all enjoy it and learn a little bit in the process as well. So
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
yes.